So I'm Suzanne, and I'm going to talk about how to structure your content for chatbots. By the way, by content, I don't mean the words in the dialogue, in the chatbot dialogue. I don't mean the script. If that's why you came, then we can talk about that later. But I mean integrating your chatbot with content that lives in a database or a content management system. So you've got legacy stuff, you've got existing content, and it's kind of the information that you use to answer customers' questions. So not the script, but the content that you integrate into the chatbot. We'll see. So, next slide, please. So these are some of the people I've worked for. I've got many years as a content designer and content strategist. And now I also do user research. And my experience with chatbots is at a Korean startup called Eggbun. Eggbun has 3 chatbot apps, so you can learn Korean, Chinese, or Japanese if you'd like to. And I was a conversation designer there. And my other connection to chatbots is at Scope, the charity that campaigns for equality for disabled people. I've been helping them structure their advice content so that it's future-proofed, so that their advice for disabled people can display on web, tablet, chatbot, or future platforms, so future-proofing. And in order to do that, we're having to move to a snazzy new content management system where the content is stored separately from the front-end presentation layer, if that makes sense. So, next slide, please. Thank you. So tonight, we'll look at what structured content is, why you need to think about it, how to do it, and the challenges. So, next slide, please. So here's an example of structured content. So we've got 6 components coming together. You've got the heading, rock cakes, ingredients, method, etc. 6 components coming together as a recipe. These components need to be labelled or marked up at the back end in the CMS. If you have a content management system, they'll be in separate fields. And this markup, this separation of content, makes them more machine readable. More machine readable than if they were just all lumped together in a long text file, as we used to do in the past. So you can pull in the components to a web page or a chatbot, and you can put them together in a different order, or you can ignore the bits that you don't want. So, next slide, please. So, Amazon's structured content. For content, we all need to be a bit more Amazon. Here we've got product info. It's structured content. It's the same content across all platforms. It's displayed at different stages of purchase, as you can see here. And next slide, please. And the same information is displayed on lots of different platforms. So on the left, you've got the desktop view, and on the right, you've got the Kindle. So yeah, ideally, we want our content to be a bit more Amazon. Separated into fields and marked up so that each platform knows what that content is and knows how to handle it. And if you can't do that, if you can't make your content more structured, this is what happens. Next slide, please. So she doesn't look very happy, right? It's a content designer, content writer. You have to ask a writer to create a version for each and every platform. So that's desktop, chatbot, tablet, everything. Next slide, please. So how can we produce structured content for chatbots and other future platforms? Well, step 1 is always to find out what your customers want, and what format they want and how much they want. Do people just want a nugget of information, or do they want long form, or whatever? Next slide, please. Step 2, understand your content, really understand what you're trying to do, its purpose, list your content types. You might only have one content type. It could be film reviews, it could be advice info, it could be how-to articles. Next slide, please. Step 3 is to specify the structure for your content type. So what I've done here is take a charity event. So this is running the Manchester Half Marathon for a charity. And in the past, somebody might have written this up as one long blog, one long text. And just by separating it out, you're going to mark it up, you're making it more machine readable, more findable. And next, please. And I've done the same thing here for some advice content. So this is an advice article called Job Interviews, 5 Tips for Success. And I've chunked it up initially into short heading, summary, short summary, publication date, stand first. And this is where you'll be thinking, so if you've got a chatbot and you want to get the advice into the chatbot, you'll probably be pulling through to the chatbot the short heading and the short summary, or you could pull through, short heading and stand first, and then you probably want to think, well, am I going to put the link to the whole article in the chatbot dialogue? Is somebody really going to read a whole article in a chatbot? I'm not sure, to be honest. That's where user testing comes in. So step 4, next please. Metadata tagging. So when you produce content, you need to tag it to the topic to again, make it more machine readable, more understandable. So the article that we had on careers advice, we would tag it as job interviews, jobs and careers advice. Next please. So the challenges of producing structured content for future platforms. It's a human challenge. So writers are used to writing long-form content in the main. Asking people to chunk it up and fill in lots of separate fields is it can be a bit of a shock for people, because writers think, well, I want to write my article, I can't be bothered to fill in all the extra fields. So it can be a burden. Writers are also used to creating web pages, so people think in terms of, I'm writing for an individual web page, and I want to be able to see that web page before I publish it. And some writers can find it difficult to write if they can't see what it's going to look like at the front end. What's it going to look like in a chatbot dialogue? What's it going to look like on a tablet or whatever? If your user research turns up that your customers want nuggets, so fully formed, crafted small answers, standalone answers, and your writers are used to doing long form, then again, that's something to address. And tagging. So traditionally, writers have just written articles. They haven't really had to think about, how do I tag it? What's the metadata? And they may not realise the implications of not tagging it. For example, it might not display somewhere. It might not be findable. It's also difficult to get all writers tagging your content in a centralised way, using a standard set of tags, because in the past people have just used free-form tags and writers have made up their own tags to describe what it's like. But these days we want to be having a centralised set of tags that produces consistent tagging across all articles. And finally, next please. So this book is called Content Everywhere. So this book can say it far better than I can. It's a very comprehensive, I don't get any commission, but I'm just saying it because it's a good book if you're looking at content everywhere. The only thing is, it was written in 2012 and it doesn't mention chatbots anywhere, but it's just the principles are the same. You've got to tag your content, you've got to understand what you're doing with your content, and if you're serious about content and chatbots, then I would read this and just apply it to chatbots. So there we go. That's me. Here's your fiver. Oh, no.
Do we have any questions?
It's a real question. But I've got a real question that you can ask first.
This looks like a unidirectional concept where you are asking a question and an answer. but chatbots are generally conversational. So if doing it on a CMS level completely defeats the purpose rather than using an engine like Lewis or other machine learning.
So I guess there's two worlds colliding here. Basically, there's new startups that are producing chatbots and chatbot content on there, but I'm attacking it from the point of view of big companies, big charities, government that have lots of legacy content that they need to chunk up to surface to chatbots. Does that? I'm not sure if I understood the question though.
So I would say so this is more of a back end. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes. So this is not the front end. This is when you're answering a spot question. So you've got a question. Somebody wants one bit of advice, one nugget of information. So this happens maybe after the conversation. This happens as part of the conversation. I've just been diagnosed as X. Can you help me with what benefits I need to claim? Or my child. Can you help me choose the right school for my child? That kind of thing, and it's more advice. Yeah.
I have so many questions that I'm trying to decide how to prioritise them.
I'm not very technical, by the way, so
That's fine.
yeah, I'm purely content.
I know that this kind of like isn't about like the script, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the kind of interaction between structured content and script, because one of the things that I've found in scripting chatbots is that context plays a really big part in understanding and delivering that structured content in a way that's contextual to that entire conversation. Do you have any thoughts about how you do that in a kind of clever way?
Not a clever way. I guess just tagging comes to mind. So if you've tagged all your content in an SEO way, in a kind of user-focused way, then you're going to recognise all the. So the future is AI, right? We have our content and our application. We plug in an AI plugin, and you don't need to structure your content in future because the AI does everything for you. So this is for a world in between where we haven't yet got the perfect AI plugin, the perfect AI application that can understand free text. I hope I'm not contradicting the previous speaker, but this is for the world of now, where you're trying to get the dialogue, you're trying to match up user intent with what you've got in your content management system. For the in-between world we're in at the moment.
I have a really practical question as well. What would you recommend as the kind of the best CMS system to use for chatbots at the moment, for structured content for chatbots?
Well, it really depends. So if you're a net new chatbot, that's if you're a startup and you're a net new chatbot and you're creating your content as you go along, then that you can choose the new systems that are on the market. But if you're I don't have that much experience with those. But if you're a bricks and mortar organisation or government or big organisations that have already got loads and loads of content that you're trying to make more chatbot friendly, then usually you choose a headless CMS, something like Sitecore. So at Scope, I've been helping them plumb in Sitecore. There's also Drupal 8. So it's about creating content that's separated off from the front end so that you can display it anywhere you want to. But that's only two, Drupal 8 and Sitecore, so there's loads out there.
I would say Excel.
I would imagine that these CMS providers, that these government organisations, large companies, whatever, have a sort of legacy state of many years of grunging around. I would imagine that the ones that would survive, the CMSs, the ones that provided tools to migrate, the legacy content up to a chatbot type presentation, and the ones that don't will effectively die.
That's exactly
Or
right.
get bought up by IBM or something, whatever.
No, that is exactly right. So, I mean, Sitecore isn't a new CMS at all. Sitecore is just remarketing itself as a headless CMS, as a, as suitable for pinging content to chatbots and all future platforms. So there's a lot of marketing hype out there. Basically, you just need to make sure that you've got your content chunked up in the right way. If you've written nuggets rather than, a whole essay. And you need to make sure that your CMS can surface it via a content API to any damn platform you want. The Guardian, for example, I mean, some of the best examples are from publishing, where they've got a content API and you can ping your content to iPad, web, everywhere, chatbot if necessary.
Do you need to alter your approach to how you structure content when taking into consideration users with disabilities or who are vulnerable?
Well, yes. I mean, the number one thing that helps make content accessible is plain English. So obviously here I'm talking about advice content, practical, factual content. I'm not talking about novels, and I'm not talking about the long read. I'm not talking about Guardian, carefully crafted long Guardian articles. They will stay as long form forever because that's what we want. But I would like to ask you, though, whether you think chatbots are accessible. Because,
For who?
well, when we say accessible, what do we mean? Sorry, being a user researcher here. But we're not just talking about people with screen readers, we're talking about people with motor difficulties, we're talking about people with learning difficulties, we're talking about people with all kinds of conditions. So are chatbots accessible for all audiences? I don't know. Again, I would test.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Give a hand to Suzanne.